As a child, I used to have quite an imagination and often daydreamed of fantastic things that could only happen in a creative mind. This story is one of those creations that came out of actual events that really happened. Of course, I blended the actual events with the fantasy events here to get a story that I hope will intrigue at least my little nephews a little. It will go into my book, and I'm writing for my children, and give me the recreation of exercising the creative side of my personality. When I was a child, I used to get creeped out while walking alone in the woods or at night by that feeling that something was watching me or following me from behind. I just could not seem to shake the feeling something was back there, and it might cause me harm, but most certainly it did cause me alarm. There's a good possibility that my cousin Ronnie Robinson and his stories may have had something to do with that. I do remember watching the Daniel Boone TV show one time, and Daniel Boone's son Israel Boone had that same feeling. He asked his dad about it and was told there was something back there, and it was called a hide-a-behind. Israel asked why he could never see one when he turned around to look, and Daniel told him they were very quick and crafty. He told him no matter how fast you turn to look at them, they can anticipate and they'll stay behind you still. No matter where you might look to try and see them, they will always remain behind you. Well, if this doesn't just completely creep out a little kid, I don't know what would. Armed with the new information I had learned on the Daniel Boone TV show, I talked to my brother Paul about it at length. We decided to try and see how quickly we could turn around in an effort to see a hide-a-behind. We were always unsuccessful in our attempts to see a hide-a-behind. We then decided to act naturally in conversation, and on a certain cue, we would go from conversation to hopefully unexpectedly turn in to discover a hide-a-behind with his guard down. Nothing we tried worked, and we were not successful in spotting a hide-a-behind, no matter how hard we tried. We even tried holding up a mirror to see behind us and in front of us at the same time, but we were unsuccessful at that as well. We didn't dare ask our dad because we were sure he wouldn't believe in any sort of a thing. So we decided to take this quest to the only person we knew that might actually know about hide-a-behinds and be willing to discuss their theories on the finer points of successfully exposing one. The next opportunity we had, we would consult Howard Jackson, the authority on all things strange, silly, unusual, and interesting. We were really lucky to have such a sage in close proximity to where we lived and to be friends with him. The next time our dad went to bale hay for Howard Jackson, Paul and I made sure we were perched on the fenders of the tractor as Dad headed up the road pulling the hay baler. Dad pulled into the field of windrows and started prepping the baler for work. Meanwhile, all you could see of Paul and I was heels and elbows as we ran jumping across windrows towards Howard Jackson's house. Howard Jackson's house is always where we found mystery and things of interest. But today it was where we would milk wisdom and insight from our own personal sage. As always, Howard was in his basement whittling something out of a block of wood. On this occasion, I believe he was whittling a box with windows on each side and a round wooden ball on the inside. The ball was bigger than the windows and would roll from one end of the box to the other when you tilted the box, but the ball was trapped inside the box, with no lid, and no opening large enough to get the ball out of the box. This interesting object kept us from remembering what we wanted to ask for a few minutes as we were spellbound by Howard's whittled creation. Finally, we got around to talking about hide-a-behinds with Howard. He was completely familiar with them and seemed to know a great deal about their habits. He told us they actually could be in a parallel dimension, and then explained that was another reality that existed in time right beside the one we're in, and most people could never see hide-a-behinds. He also emphasized the word most and sort of winked with a knowing nod. We took that as a sign that Howard had a lot more to say on that subject and proceeded to pry that knowledge right out of him as quickly as we could. Howard told us he believed that other dimensions could be seen, and he showed us proof right there in his Bible in 1 Corinthians 13, where it talks about us seeing through a glass darkly. We didn't understand all those details, but we certainly wanted to know more. Howard then told us, though they could be in another dimension, he personally believed they were sort of in an imagination, which is a very special kind of dimension. Imaginations allow interactions in ways that we can only imagine, and they, unlike what he showed us in the Bible, are where our imaginations touch reality. He told us Walt Disney was an actual engineer of imaginations, and that is why they called him an Imagineer. He brought imagination to where it touched the reality of engineering. We both loved Walt Disney, and we both had very active imaginations. We told Howard we wanted to see a hide-a-behind and explained all the ways we had tried. We told him we were sure we had outsmarted the hide-a-behinds when we tried using a mirror while we walked through the woods, but even that was not successful. Howard said, of course, a mirror didn't work because hide-a-behinds can't have a reflection since they're not a solid body. He said, heck, they don't even have a shadow because they are sort of like a shadow themselves. Howard told us if we wanted to see a hide-a-behind, we had to zig when the hide-a-behind zagged, and we could catch one of them off guard and reveal him to our sight. He also warned us that things might get a little squirrely if we caught one off guard, and to be ready for what might happen. He told us they could not hurt us personally since they did not have a solid body, but they could do all sorts of mischief that we could only imagine, and may upset the balance of our known reality enough that we may not like it very much. He told us the reason they could not hurt us is because they were more like a shadow and operated in that realm, making them harmless to our bodies. He reminded us that nobody should be afraid of his shadow, and so nobody should fear a hide-a-behind. He told us to meditate and imagine about what might happen if we revealed a hide-a-behind and be ready to stop his mischief before he did something that we might not appreciate. We went home and started to work imagining first what it actually meant for us to zig when the hide-a-behind zagged. And then we began imagining what it might happen if we tricked a hide-a-behind into letting us see him. We imagined that if a hide-a-behind were akin to a shadow but could not hurt us, they could hurt our shadows in their mischief maybe. What if they did something to our shadows? It might be embarrassing to have a strange-looking shadow. We also imagined if they could do mischief with our shadows, could they do something to our reflections in the mirrors as well? We decided we'd better do a lot of imagining of what could be and what we could do before we tried to reveal a hide-a-behind. We spent a good 2 weeks imagining what kind of mischief a hide-a-behind might cause and how we might react to each situation to prevent the mischief. We were about ready for the attempt at revealing a hide-a-behind. We just had to come up with a plan to zig when the hide-a-behind zagged. We figured, well, we could go into the woods on our little trail and walk arm in arm, saying zig as we step to the left and zag as we step to the right. We only needed to determine which zag we would zig on to do the reveal attempt. Why not 7? 7 is a lucky number. We decided 7 may not be enough times to lull the hide-a-behind into our trap. Besides, he might be suspicious something was going on and figure that we would use that lucky number. We decided 13 would be a better number because most people steer clear of 13. We hoped it would be unlucky for the hide-a-behind and set that as the zag that we would zig upon. What would happen the next day is somewhere between truth and imagination. Maybe a child's fantasy mixed with some dreams, and maybe a poor memory of an old man that is just patching up the scant facts that he remembers with what could have been or might have been, along with a good dose of things imagined. After all, is that not what often makes our stories interesting? Besides, everyone knows the truth never needs to get in the way of a good story. I'm sure the things in this story that are not true were pondered in our minds as fantasies or dreams, and so should be included in this story because even having thought about them would make them true in that sense. The next day after school, Paul and I could hardly wait to get off the bus and couldn't get to the house fast enough. We changed clothes and quickly went over our plan as Paul strapped on his favorite hunting knife. We agreed 13 was the number we would use to try and reveal the hide-a-behind. We headed toward the woods, and as we got to the edge, we locked arms and swayed to the left, saying zig, and back to the right, saying zag, and counting 1 silently in our minds. We did this slowly and with rhythm while counting another number in our heads until we reached 12. We dared not look at each other or act any different on 13 as we said zig and swayed to the left. And then we said zig again instead of zag on the 13th time. As we said zig again, we pivoted around, and all I can say is what we saw next was the intersection of reality and imagination. Maybe there is a dimension called an imagination. And maybe we just wanted to see a hide-a-behind so badly we imagined it all in our own reality. All I can say is what we saw next was better than any one of Walt Disney's creations. There was a full-blown hide-a-behind frozen right there between our shadows. He was dark and shadowy, just like a shadow, and you could see right through him. He dared not move lest he be found out for sure. I think he must have thought we might not notice him as he tried to blend right in with our shadows. After all, the hide-a-behind was so much like a shadow, but a shadow with no corresponding solid object. Dark and without definition, just like a shadow. We just looked at the hide-a-behind for a few moments, trying to figure out what to do next. Probably like Wile E. Coyote would if he ever caught the Roadrunner. This is when, just as Howard Jackson said it might, things got a little squirrely. We were so focused on the large hide-a-behind, he was the same size as our own shadows, that we failed to see all the little hide-behinds down below. All of a sudden, the little hide-behinds must have lost their nerve, and we saw hundreds of them as they all scurried off silently and disappeared into the woods. I have since wondered if they represent all of our fears, just as the large hide-behind might represent the sum of all our fears. I then remembered possibly the only quote from Franklin Delano Roosevelt that is truly worth remembering. "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." I even remember thinking, I bet he stole that quote from his grandma. That quote was playing in my mind along with the assurance from Howard Jackson that we had nothing to fear from a hide-a-behind. The little hide-a-behinds left the larger, I'm guessing adult, hide-a-behind alone and still motionless. Finally Paul said, "I see him," and pointed straight at the hide-a-behind. Just as quickly as he said that, the hide-a-behind grabbed the shadow away from Paul's hunting knife, as he then turned and grabbed the shadow of my own body away. He was holding the knife shadow up to my own shadow's throat. I again remember the assurance of Howard Jackson telling us the hide-a-behind could not hurt us. But this appeared to be the mischief he was talking about. I was thinking, can a shadow die? I wondered how strange it might be to go through life with no shadow, and wondering if something happened to my shadow, would I still have a reflection in the mirror? If not, I figured I would have to depend on someone else to shave me and comb my hair the rest of my life. And then I remembered, vampires have no reflection in a mirror. Ugh. I certainly hope this was not some sort of back door to that world for sure. I was thinking about all this, and it occurred to me that the hide-a-behind may have violated the laws of his own dimension by grabbing my shadow and holding the knife shadow to my shadow's throat. I thought we may just be able to use that against him. I said something to Paul about that, and the hide-a-behind jerked my shadow back tighter and pulled the knife shadow even closer to my shadow's throat. Just as he did so, Paul quickly raised his hunting knife and threw it, shadowless, straight into the dark area that was the hide-a-behind. The knife stuck into a tree, and the knife point was right there where the hide-a-behind's eyes would have been if he had had eyes. The hide-a-behind's arms dropped. The knife shadow jumped back to where it should have been in relation to the knife. My own shadow did the same and jumped back in place, but the hide-a-behind appeared to be pinned to the tree by the knife, arms limped. His violation of the laws of his own dimension allowed Paul to do the same and use his knife against the hide-a-behind. Paul then stepped up and pulled his knife out from the tree, and the hide-a-behind's dark, shadowy form slid down the tree trunk and disappeared into the ground and back into the realm of imagination. I noticed that the tree began bleeding a little bit of green blood from the wound where the knife had been sticking, and then it stopped after it ran down the side of the tree for about 3 feet. It's interesting to note that green is the opposite of red. We never again saw another hide-a-behind, and I believe we sent a message into their dimension that we did not appreciate them sneaking around behind us or making us nervous and afraid. I've never since felt the fear of something behind me when I walk through the woods or in the dark of night. After all, it is true that we have nothing to fear but fear itself.